Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight's discussion is going to focus on the COVID-19 pandemic and the effects, the impact it has had on the education sector in Rwanda. Joining us, we have our guests online. As usual, we are joined by the Minister of State for Primary and Secondary Education, Mr. Gaspard Twagirayezu. Honorable Minister, welcome to The Square.
Thank you for having me.
Great. We are also joined by someone who's been in the education sector, is an educator for over a decade, and his name is Edward Munyaburanga, who is the head teacher and founder of Highland School. Edward, great to have you on The Square once again.
Thank you so much.
Great. We're happy to have you. My name is Dan Mpisi, host of The Square. I am joined by The Square's resident panelists. Charlie Haba, I'll start with you. How are you today?
I'm very fine. How are you doing?
Good.
Dan?
We're also joined by Barna Namata. Barna Namata is a resident panelist on The Square. Great to have you, Barna, as always.
Thank you, Dana.
Great. Due to a couple of technical difficulties, we're going to have a shorter than usual show. But that said, we're going to try and tackle as much as we can on a very, very heavy topic. And we've had people on our social media feed talking to us and sharing their views from a parent perspective, from an educational perspective, and so on and so forth. So the first question goes directly to the Honorable Minister Gaspard Twagirayezu, who is going to explain to us the impact on this COVID-19 pandemic on schools. We know that on 30th April, the government released a communique that stated that the earliest schools will open in Rwanda is September of this year. And essentially, private and secondary schools have more or less missed out on an academic year. And Honorable Minister, if you could just tell us in detail the impact on primary and secondary schools, especially public schools, and what various government interventions exist. Just briefly, and we'll come back to the topic at hand. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Diana. I will start by saying that the education sector is among the sectors that have also been hit by this COVID-19. And if you remember, the schools were actually the first to be closed here. We managed to get our students safely back home. And as you said at the beginning, the earliest that the schools will open is September. And this is going to be, this is a decision that was taken for all schools that follow national programs. When we closed the schools, term one was almost at the end, but we have had many issues in different schools that prevented people from properly learning in the first term, and that reason, coupled with the difficulties in learning that are going to be brought by this many months of lockdown, have informed the decision to actually restart the school year from September. So which means when schools restart in September, all the schools that follow the national program are going to start term one, then followed by term 2 and term 3. So this is what's happening in terms of the school calendar and scheduling. The details will of course follow. But in the sector, we have been doing different things to make sure that we are ready for the reopening. So we have been trying as much as we can to ensure that there is continuity of learning online, to make sure that the students are getting the materials that they need. So we have put together different e-learning programs. We have been delivering lessons on TV and radio and cell phones. So this is all in the effort to make sure that when the students get back to school, they will have that package that's going to allow them to start and continue with the school year. So I would say that in a nutshell, this is what's happening related to the decision to reopen the schools in September. And I hope that we will get a chance to continue to expand on what we are doing, and also answer some other questions that are related to this decision.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. That was short and to the point. We also know that online, the Ministry of Education has released information, frequently asked questions on what's going to happen to schools, parents who have questions about school fees that have already been paid, and so forth and so on, which we'll get back to as well. And I'd just like to hear very quickly from my fellow panelists, if you have any interventions to make on what Honourable Minister has just said. Brenna?
I just had a clarification to make. First of all, I'm very happy personally that I think for the first time over the last 15 years, the Ministry of Education is giving parents at least 3 months notice of what is going to come.
Of changes, big
yes,
changes.
Of changes. So I think even if the changes may inconvenience us in the short term, I think it is good that parents at least know what to expect. And the information is coming through now, so there's a bit of clarity going forward in terms of what it will look like in September. But I just had a question on my mind around what it means homeschooling for now, because suddenly working parents have to spend time, they have children at home who have homework or the learning material that he's talking about, and then they have to also work. So how parents can navigate that kind of environment. So my question to him is whether they've spoken to the Ministry of Labour to at least come up with flexible hours that allow working parents to maybe work instead of a typical day 8 to 5, or maybe say you can do 5 hours and then we'll give you maybe 3 or 4 hours to help your children.
Honourable Minister, would you care to answer that? And just to also echo what Brenna is saying, that's also a good question because it speaks to institutional coordination. This is something the ministry has done, but of course it affects parents who have jobs, and the Ministry of Labour comes in as well. So a very
just a lighter rejoinder
good point,
before
Brenna.
the Honourable Minister comes
Yes.
in. I'd never thought of homeschooling mothers who are accustomed to breastfeeding parents. So now we are faced with the situation of homeschooling parents.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Honourable Minister, if you'd like to answer Brenna's question.
Yes. I would start by saying that this is a difficult situation that we find ourselves in. I myself am a parent, and we were transformed overnight into teachers. So we were asked to help our kids learn from home. And this is a very difficult situation, especially when now parents are beginning to return to work. And there have been different questions of parents asking themselves, how am I going to be able to continue to support my kids? And this is a question that does not have just one answer or an easier answer. But I would say that at the Ministry of Education, and also we understand the issue, and this is actually why we are saying that these lessons that we have online now, and also these different programs, are designed to help kids stay sharp during if I may say, during this term. But when they go back to school, we will have different programs to make sure that those who were left behind get a chance to catch up, and so that they can continue. So, but this is a conversation that we are going to continue having because we want to hear from parents, we want to hear from schools, we want to hear from other stakeholders in the sector to make sure that we give the maximum possible to the students. So conversations are ongoing, and we will make sure that we facilitate as much as possible both students and also parents who are facing this struggle of becoming teachers overnight.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. Like we said earlier on, these are unprecedented times from parents to teachers to, the government. We are really trying to wrap our heads around this whole conversation on education, which is one of the hardest hit sectors. Just before we go to Edward, Charles, is there something you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think the minister says something that's extremely important, that they're in all this together, and I'll speak on my behalf as a parent and secondly as a panelist on the square.
Yes.
If you're to talk about bailout packages, and we've been speaking about this in all the previous COVID-19 shows that have been serialized, the best that the government of Rwanda can do is going to be monetary in terms of the banks easing those who had loans. But it is a time for the schools themselves to reflect. All the education shows we have had here on the square, with no exception, have been around quality of education. So it is a huge opportune moment for everyone across the education value chain to reflect on how better they can improve some of the gray areas that have been brought up, especially around quality of education. Yes.
Thank you, Charles. Edouard, we'd like to go to you. I think what this pandemic is showing us is really the value of teachers. We don't only take them for granted, but now, if more than anything, we're seeing how important they are. Pedagogy, the concept of being a teacher, not everyone can do it. So if we can hear from you, you've been a school administrator, you've been in the education sector, and you're the founder of Highland School, and you've been doing this for over 10 years. If you could just tell us quickly, what are some of the key issues faced by, during the closure of schools, faced by students and parents, as well as sharing with us some of the initiatives Highland School has taken to address this situation?
Thank you so much, and your colleagues. As you have mentioned, it is really a very big challenge, not only to teachers, but to parents and the school owners. Actually, this is something that happened just all of a sudden. No one expected it, but I would just actually to thank our government who has handled it. Especially the last
I think we're having a couple of technical issues with Edouard. Edouard, we'll come back to you. There's a problem with the connection, but we are definitely going to hear.
That schools are going to open in September. It really hit us, and
Okay, so we're going to come back to Edouard as they fix the connection. But in that sense, I'd like us to just quickly go to a Twitter feed because we have our viewers who are sharing with us their comments on education and their views on how this pandemic has affected it and offering their insights. So the first tweet we have is from Olga, and Olga states that, if we could have that on our screens, Olga on Twitter states that the pandemic led to closure of schools and moving abruptly to online platforms and remote education, which is difficult for learners. For example, internet costs to these schools that have gotten here their own learning sites, plus those at home is not the environment to study from. We'll go to our next tweet, but this reminds me of MTN, who said that they cut costs for these initiatives to be able to happen in terms of data and so forth and so on. We have another tweet from Frank, and Frank states that it's both the jobs market and the education sector that will be hit the hardest by this pandemic. The road to recovery will require leadership, discipline, and consistency. And he goes on to say government and stakeholders working hand in glove. Charles, I think this is what you mentioned earlier with regards to quality education. We also have Jean-Aimé, who states to us that e-learning isn't for all. That's the reality out there. In terms of accessibility, obviously, to the rural area students, primary and secondary education system really needs to be reformed. and constant in ways that can resist such circumstances. Absolutely. This is a reset button for us to understand how we can go back to the drawing board regarding education to prepare for the future. And no one saw this coming, but it's something to factor in. And yes, I think we have another tweet from Manager who states that the ministry hasn't yet talked about those who don't have learning materials, also those who left their material in boarding schools. I think that they should get in arrangement with the schools how to get them. Yeah, I think a lot of students left material behind. As we wait for Edouard, I would like to hear from the resident panelists. Charles?
Yeah, I want to talk about resetting that I think Frank Chijenza talked about. You see, as you said, as you rightfully said, Diana, we are in unprecedented times, and I want to talk about the amount of money that the government of Rwanda has put into universal education and the whole literacy program. So they invested a lot of money in a number of areas. I'll start with infrastructure, schools, classroom blocks, mention it, roads to the schools and what have you. For a very, very long time, I wouldn't be too surprised whether that is still the case today, that a lot of the war veterans who put themselves into clubs, investment clubs, associations and companies, the easiest way to get jobs was through the primary and secondary universal programs, building classroom blocks and what have you, and roads and so on and so forth. Then take it a notch higher and look at initiatives such as the public library schemes that were at every sector. Take it a notch higher. And the public library schemes were mainly around improving our literacy. Take it a third notch higher and look at the schemes that were done for the district education funds. So where am I going with all this? That now more than ever, should we start reaping the benefit of some of these initiatives that were done? The prime of all these initiatives is Umwari Musako, the Teachers Savings Scheme. The Teachers Savings Scheme, when it was thought about, it was predominantly around teachers who earn peanuts. Now it is coming in to bail them out at a moment when their salary is no longer coming through. So it is actually a wake-up call, and I like that tweet around rediscovering ourselves. Brings me to the point of language. Schools, even teachers themselves, how are they rediscovering themselves? How are they giving their different stakeholders value during this period? It's probably an opportunity for every teacher. Remember earlier on, Diana, you said that the quality of education has been our biggest punching bag here on the square.
Yes.
Isn't it the best opportunity for every school to say, can we go into online? And can we go online and teach and get our teachers to go into language proficiency programs, such that by the time September comes, our teachers can actually speak better English, better Kinyarwanda, better French for that matter, and so on and so forth. So may I look at it as a blessing in disguise, actually, that we are going through these uncertain times. Yes.
Brenna?
Absolutely. And I just feel that we need to kind of be conscious of what the reality is. One thing that the pandemic is teaching everybody is that you have to get out of your comfort zone. Now, even with education systems, we know for the last 30 years or so, we've relied on classrooms, chalk and all, but that is changing very quickly. I mean, this week I learned of a software that now avails courses via text, WhatsApp. Yeah? So whether we like it or not, because right now there's a lot of concern around digitalizing the education system. Yes, you can understand the inconvenience because you're not prepared, but that is what the future looks like, Eventually, as we get more Rwandans online, it's unfortunate that the smartphone campaign came in, it had just started, and then we had this. But imagine if the smart phone campaign had already,
Yes.
it would be so easy to do what they're doing right now. And so, as much as parents are inconvenienced and everybody is conscious about the fact that not everybody has access to the internet, the cost of electronic gadgets, electricity to charge them, the reality is that is where we are headed. Okay, so better that now we test it and we begin to think about it. I'm sure now parents will begin to look at gadgets not just for, because the irony is that most parents allow their children to be on social media. They allow them to use their phones for Facebook, Instagram, all kinds
more
of
a distraction than education.
Yes. So hopefully, by the end of the next 4 months, parents will begin to think differently about their mobile phones. They should be able to get out these mobile phones and say, look, I know there's work that you can do on this phone, and it is possible to disable social media on a phone, so let's not dwell on what we don't have control over and start to think about the possibilities. And the possibilities with technology are immense, I can tell you. And it is not so much about us. It is the world around us. Whether you like it or not, it is changing. So you have to find a way of adapting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would like us to check on Edward, because it's impossible to have this conversation without a teacher, a parent, someone in the education sector. Edward, are you with us?
Yes, I am, and I'm sorry for the connectivity is not good.
No, please don't be. Yeah, if you could just quickly wrap up what you were saying. Tell us what you're doing at Highland School to address some of these issues.
Yeah, thank you so much. What we are doing now is trying to engage with students via WhatsApp. We created WhatsApp groups for each class, and so we are trying to send teaching materials and exercises such that the parents can help their children, to run through that. But I think, as it was echoed earlier, we are finding a challenge whereby now parents are going back to work, and so yet, they go with their phones. They can't leave the phones with the children, as Bana was talking about it. So we are now trying to see how we can marry the two. So we are actually now talking of reducing the intensity of the exercises. So we give one exercise like maybe on Monday, so we skip Tuesday, such that when parents come back, we give the exercise to the child, and then the child will do it the next day, and then the parent comes and then snapshots and then sends back to the teacher for marking, like that. So that's what we are trying to do. But we are also working on the delivery content, whereby we are packaging content, including some exercises, now to be given to students. So parents will be picking them from school to be given to students at home, and then they will do. Then they can, after finishing them, they'll bring them to school. Teachers will mark them, and then they will take another one. So we are giving one for a month. One package includes all the subjects. Which maybe a child in P5 or P6, we'll give them a package that includes all the subjects in that class. And then after 1 month, but actually we are doing them currently. So we are doing the online, and at the same time we are also doing the delivered content, to make sure that at least children don't stay idle at home, even when they have gone back to work. That is one aspect. The other aspect that we're actually struggling with is now make sure that these teachers who are actually engaged in work, remember, actually they are now doing more work because they are marking online. It's not like they're marking in class. They have to mark an individual child, and they are marking on telephones. It becomes really a very big challenge. So we are trying actually to engage the parents to make sure that we go through this together, because the work of the teacher has now changed up. It has like doubled. So remember, he teach and mark children at the same time in class. But this time we have to concentrate on an individual child. While he's marking, and then he sends back the feedback and then back and forth. So actually it becomes very tedious work, and they really want to applaud our teachers. And I know you are the teachers that are doing it, and I want to thank them very, very much. It's now that actually we can see that we have committed teachers who are not just doing it for a living, but are just doing it for a calling. And so I really want to thank them very much for whatever they are. They can hear me. Really appreciate what they are doing. And at the same time, I'm calling upon parents, really to make sure that during this time when schools, they can't get enough capacity to make sure that they handle all the teachers' needs. As you know, like in other institutions, for private schools especially, including ours, it is a very big problem, because remember, the school fees we set them between the parents and the school, calculating what the expenses for a term. So the school fees that we charge is not just a block of a certain amount that we just think and we just put it there. So we just pay maybe 300.
Edward, thank you very much. I would like to go to our Twitter feed, yeah, Edward, thank you very much. We heard most of...
Calculate that with the parents. And then we see, okay.
Okay, Edward, thank you very much. We heard most of what you said, and thank you for giving that insight. I like the collaborative effort between teachers and parents. And actually, before I came on the show tonight, I was listening to a friend of mine tell me that there is, like you said earlier, opportunities for win-win solutions. So in their neighborhood, they got teachers who they know had been laid off from their schools. These are teachers who were also teaching their kids, and they partnered with another family, and they got this teacher to come and teach, their children. So it's really about being proactive, being solution-oriented. I think government has done really enough as it can, but the idea of parents, getting together and connecting to teachers who are laid off and still enabling the teacher to have some sort of income at the end of the day and their kids taught at the end of the day. These are some of the ideas and solutions that we really need to be focusing on. Brenna, like you rightly put, this is a time for us to really start thinking out of the box. So we have a couple of tweets that are also there for our guests and specifically the minister. The first tweet from Omurasha states that school closings due to coronavirus concerns have turned a spotlight on those problems and how they contribute to educational and income inequality in the country. So, Rwanda Education Ministry, at what level have they developed a backup online system to help students at home? That's the first tweet, backup online system to help students at home. Then we have another tweet from Louis. Louis tells us that some private schools are soon losing their teachers, maybe due to different opportunities in other non-educational sectors after they have failed to get salaries. Won't this affect government schools in receiving children from private schools, yet they don't have enough rooms? Third tweet is from Sylvine Sanga, who says that teachers have to be paid. This should be clear. If we are to do a $1 campaign, let us do it. For private schools, Ministry of Education says they have to use the financial scheme the government has put in place. And then our tweet is from Kizito, and Kizito asks the minister, can the minister assist us with explaining the Ingoboka program to private schools as they are affected by COVID-19? Is the money payable? If so, is it paid back with interest? And what are the conditions for getting the service? So over to you, Honorable Minister, for some of the questions that our viewers have put forward to you.
Thank you very much. And before I begin to answer the questions, I would want to make a quick comment on what Bernard was saying about digital being the future. So this is something that we are all now aware of. And actually, as you rightly said, this COVID-19 has actually been an opportunity for us to discover the challenges that we have in the not only in the education sector but also in other different sectors. So this is why we have been trying to strengthen our online learning systems. Now we have online systems for basic education, for universities, and also for the Rwanda Polytechnic, also the TVET. So this is something that we are going to try to continue to invest in and to strengthen, because, as you rightly said, this is digital is the future. But also we have to realize that even that road to the future needs to be built. So this is why we are trying to invest in all these systems. So that's about the online systems that are helping us to bridge that gap. But we also know that as much as we invest in all these online platforms and also supplement them with TV or radio or phones, also know these things are not universal. So which means there is still a large number of kids who are not being reached, and this is something we are very aware of, and we are actually trying to invest more and to try to so that we can reach as many people as possible using online learning. So this is one, and I think Sylvie was talking about the teachers especially those teachers in the private sector. And this is a problem. We have been seeing some of the teachers who are trying to, some of the school owners or who are trying to actually have been putting teachers out of work, terminating their contracts. And obviously, you have been saying that this is not something that should be happening, because we have seen schools that are being creative to make sure that these teachers have the basic needs that they have. And this is ultimately the responsibility of the private schools. And we all need to realize that our whole education system rests on the backs of the teachers. So we need to make sure that these teachers are well taken care of, whether they are in the private sector, also in the public sector. So for the private sector, I think someone was mentioning about this recovery fund that people have been talking about. And in the last cabinet, an economic recovery plan was adopted, and this is something that's also going to include private schools. So which means that once the details are finalized, so these are the details that are going to be communicated by the government. It will mean that schools will have to apply or get some relief packages according to the conditions that will be set. But what we said was that we would want the schools to actually prioritize the teachers, because when we go back to school, these teachers we need them now, and we will need them in the future. So which is why we are calling on the schools to actually, when that package is available, to make use of it so that they can actually be ready for the school year. So, but I also like to thank the schools that are being creative in making sure that the teachers actually get their basic needs met. And I also appreciate Sylvie's idea of trying to help, of engaging the public on how can the public support these teachers. So this is something that's always welcome. But I would want to emphasize that the private sector in education, they actually educate around 11% collectively of our students. So this is a sector that we need to be strong and to be able to support their teachers and their students. So when this is actually why I think these private schools are also going to be considered when we are, as a government, thinking about the economic recovery overall.
We unfortunately, like I said earlier on the show, we are short of time due to some technical issues. But thank you very much for weighing in, Honourable Minister, as well as to you, Edward. And I'd just like to state, at least online, as far as we're concerned, we will carry the conversation forward on the square on education. We have many tweets coming in, and I think we'll pair them with the communication directors from the ministry to answer some of these questions that our viewers have. And I'm sure the ministry as well on other traditional media such as TV and radio will keep on informing the public on these big directives from government. So to our guests, thank you very much and have a good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And here at the square, I would like to just hear closing remarks from you, Berna and Charles, on this situation. I like your perspective of saying there's a silver lining in this pandemic, at least regarding education, in making us rethink and revalue how we have been progressing in terms of education in the country. But very brief remarks from you as we close tonight's show.
I'm glad with the September calendar, because at least the issue of access is addressed in a way, because we still have many Rwandans that are offline. So it means they're not losing out. It's a question of those who have the opportunity can still access, but if you're offline, you'll still be able to have a chance to begin. Secondly, I feel that the Ministry of Labour really needs to look at initiating flexible working hours, whether it's introducing timesheets. It's high time that we relooked into, the flexibility within the workplace to allow parents not just to be good employees, but also be better parents.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Charles, I'm told we really have run out of time, but I think the insights you've been given have been very, very insightful, as echoed by some of our people on Twitter, which I'm sure you'll see after the show. So we've come to the end of the show. I'm very, very sorry that it was shorter than usual, but I think we'll definitely need to discuss this topic on the show again. So to our viewers, thank you very much for joining us. To our partners, Uzi Collection and Bourbon Coffee, thank you for staying with the Square. And like I said early on, please keep the conversation going, at least on social media, using the hashtag #TheSquareRW. Thank you for tuning in. Have a good night and see you next week.
Pick that gun. Move along now. Come on, Evan. Drive that nigga. Pick that gun. Move along now. Yeah, what you doing, boy? Come on.
240 for Bob.
Sun gon' set here.
Down the mountain.
Sun gon' set here.
Down the mountain.
Sun gon' set here.
Down the mountain. Teach me, Lord.
Edward, get him water.
Oh, freedom.